In the Pokémon world, some items are so rare and elusive that most players will never see them without outside help. Tonight, we'll explore the rarest items ever to appear across the series, from mysterious event-exclusive key items to nearly impossible held items. Settle in as we uncover the stories behind these treasures and the secrets that make them so hard to find. Among the rarest and most mysterious items in Pokemon history, the Azure Flute stands apart as something almost mythical in its own right. This key item was programmed into Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum as the intended method for encountering Arceus, the so-called original one said to have created the entire Pokemon universe. The flute's in-game description is simple yet evocative. A flute that puts out echoing sounds that do not seem to be of this world. Using it was supposed to unlock the Hall of Origin, a hidden area located far above the spear pillar at the peak of Mount Coronet. Here's how it was meant to work. Once the player had the Azure Flute in their bag, they could travel to Spear Pillar after becoming champion. There, a glowing staircase made of light would appear, spiraling upward into the clouds. At the very top was the Hall of Origin, an ethereal platform floating high above Sinnoh. Waiting there was Arceus at level 80, ready for battle. This was the ultimate secret encounter, a one-on-one meeting with the creator of all Pokemon. The thing is, no official event for the Azure Flute was ever distributed. The item existed fully coded into the games, complete with functionality, but it was never legitimately obtainable. The only way players could access it was through hacking, glitches, or unofficial event simulations. This decision by Game Freak has been the subject of debate for over a decade. Some believe the developers worried that the encounter with Arceus was too otherworldly and abstract for younger players. Others think the company decided to save the Arceus reveal for a later generation, opting to distribute the Pokemon directly through mystery gift events instead. What makes the Azure Flute even more fascinating is that it's not just a deleted item, it's a window into a very different vision for how Arceus might have been introduced. The Hall of Origin is unlike any other location in the series, with its glowing white tiles, serene sky backdrop, and music that feels both sacred and unsettling. Because of this, players who hacked in the Azure Flute often describe the experience as strangely haunting, like visiting a place you were never meant to see. In later years, Game Freak finally embraced the concept with a twist. In the Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl remakes, released over a decade later, the Azure Flute was officially made available through an update, allowing players to legitimately access the Hall of Origin for the first time. For longtime fans, this was a long-awaited closure to a mystery that had lingered since the Nintendo DS era. The Azure Flute story is one of lost plans, hidden content, and patient fan dedication. For many, it is the ultimate symbol of Pokemon's rarest treasures, an item that was always there, coded deep into the game, but unreachable without bending the rules. The Eon Ticket is one of the most legendary and sought-after items in the entire Pokemon series, not just because of what it unlocks, but because of how rare it was to obtain in its earliest appearances. First introduced in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, the Eon Ticket is a key item that allows the player to travel to a location called Southern Island, the only place in the game where you can encounter either Latias or Latios, depending on your version. While one of the two Eon duo can be caught during normal gameplay after defeating the Elite Four, The Eon ticket gave players the unprecedented opportunity to capture both. In the original Game Boy Advance versions, acquiring the Eon ticket was no simple task. It was distributed through a special real world event in 2003, meaning you had to physically attend a participating location during a limited time window. Even more unusually, the Eon ticket was not just downloaded into your save file like modern mystery gifts. It required the use of a special device called the e-reader. This peripheral could scan unique code cards, and the official Eon ticket card contained the data needed to unlock the item in your game. Once scanned into Pokémon Ruby or Sapphire, the ticket appeared in your key items pouch, and you could present it at the Slateport City Harbor to board the SS title bound for Southern Island. The rarity of the Eon ticket in this era came down to distribution. The e-reader itself was not widely owned. The event was limited to certain countries, and many players simply never had the chance to attend. But Game Freak did something very clever to make the Eon ticket slightly more accessible. They introduced a feature called record mixing. If you had the Eon ticket in your save file, you could connect your Game Boy Advance to a friend's system via link cable and share the ticket with them during a record mixing session. This turned the Eon ticket into a kind of collectible passed from player to player, and in some communities, it spread like wildfire. But in others, especially where Pokémon was less popular, finding someone with the ticket was nearly impossible. The Eon ticket made a return in Pokémon Emerald, this time with slightly different distribution methods. Certain events gave away the ticket directly via mystery gift, but its rarity remained high outside of Japan. Once again, it unlocked Southern Island, and in Emerald, it allowed you to catch whichever member of the Eon duo you didn't choose during the story. The Eon ticket disappeared for a time after Generation 3, but it resurfaced in the Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire remakes on the Nintendo 3DS. This time, the item was distributed as a mystery gift over the internet, making it much easier to obtain, at least during the limited window it was available. Just like in the originals, it granted access to Southern Island and the opportunity to catch the opposite Eon Pokémon. What makes the Eon ticket's history so fascinating is how it blends rarity with community interaction. In its earliest form, it was not just a rare collectible, it was a social artifact, something you could physically pass to a friend through the link cable connection. There was a sense of excitement when you met someone who had it, because it meant you could unlock one of the rarest experiences in the game. In a way, the Eon ticket was as much about the connections between players as it was about catching Latios or Latios. Today, the original Eon ticket e-reader cards are considered valuable collector's items, fetching high prices among Pokémon memorabilia enthusiasts. Southern Island itself has become a symbol of Pokémon's event-exclusive mystique, a reminder of a time when some of the game's most exciting content could only be unlocked through a mix of luck, timing, and real-world connections. Among Pokémon's most coveted treasures, few items are as mysterious or as famously unobtainable as the Old Sea Map. This key item exists only within Pokémon Emerald, and it was designed to unlock a secret location where one of the rarest and most beloved legendary Pokémon could be found, Mew. For fans in the mid-2000s, Mew was a mythical figure in every sense of the word, technically part of the Pokédex, but impossible to encounter without a special event. The Old Sea Map was meant to change that, offering a legitimate, in-game method of catching Mew for the first time since the original Red, Blue, and Yellow games. In Emerald's code, the Old Sea Map appears like any other key item, with a simple description, a faded sea chart that shows the way to a certain island. When given to the player, it unlocks the option to sail to a place called Faraway Island, a small hidden landmass located off the coast of Hoenn. Once there, players could explore a lush, grassy field surrounded by dense forest where Mew would appear, darting playfully out of sight. The encounter was unique in that it required you to actually sneak up on Mew in the tall grass before initiating the battle. This made catching it feel more like an adventure than a standard legendary encounter. The old sea map was officially distributed only once during the Pokémon Festa event in Japan in the year 2005. Attendees could connect their Game Boy Advance systems to a distribution machine to receive the map in their Pokémon Emerald save file. That was the only legitimate way to obtain it, and no official distributions were ever held outside of Japan. As a result, for the vast majority of players worldwide, the old sea map was something they would only ever read about in magazines or see in screenshots online. Because the item was region locked to Japan, its scarcity became legendary. Players in North America, Europe, and other regions had no legitimate way to reach Faraway Island, even though the location and event were fully coded into their copies of Pokémon Emerald. The map's exclusivity sparked frustration and fascination in equal measure. Some fans even imported Japanese copies of Emerald and attended events overseas just to obtain the map, a testament to how deeply Mew's mystique resonated with the community. The inaccessibility of the old sea map also fueled the rise of unofficial distribution methods. Through the use of cheat devices like the Action Replay or Game Shark, players could inject the item into their save files and experience the Faraway Island event for themselves. While this technically broke the rules of legitimate gameplay, it became a common practice among fans who simply wanted to see what Game Freak had hidden from most of the world. Many players who used cheats to get the old sea map described the Faraway Island event as one of the most magical moments in the series, not because it was flashy or cinematic, but because it felt like uncovering a secret you weren't supposed to know. The exclusivity of the old sea map also had an impact on Mew's place in Pokémon history. While other mythical Pokémon like Celebi and Jirachi eventually received more accessible event distributions, Mew retained an aura of mystery for much longer, in part because of how difficult it was to encounter it legitimately in the main series games. Even years later, when Mew became available through other means, fans still looked back at the old sea map as a kind of golden ticket, a rare artifact from a time when Pokémon events were truly special. It's worth noting that Faraway Island itself is a particularly beautiful and atmospheric location. The tall grass sways gently in the wind, the music is peaceful and mysterious, and the player must chase Mew as it hides behind trees and pops in and out of sight. This made the encounter feel alive, as though Mew were a real creature testing your patience before allowing itself to be caught. Many players who experienced the event firsthand have said that it remains one of the most memorable moments in their Pokémon journey. Over time, the old sea map became a collector's dream. Cartridges with a legitimate, event-obtained old sea map are extremely rare and valuable, with some selling for high prices among serious Pokémon memorabilia collectors. The scarcity, the exclusivity to Japan, and the fact that it unlocks one of the most iconic Pokémon in the series make it one of the rarest and most culturally significant items in the franchise's history. For most fans, the old sea map is more than just an in-game item. It's a symbol of an era in which Pokémon's secrets were scattered across the globe, available only to the lucky few who could attend the right event at the right time. And while modern games have made mythical Pokémon more accessible through global distribution, part of the magic of the old sea map lies in knowing that it was never meant to be easy to get. It was a treasure hidden in plain sight, waiting for the rare trainer who could find their way to Faraway Island and meet Mew on its own terms. In the long history of rare Pokemon items, the member card stands as one of the most mysterious, not because of what it does once you have it, but because of how few players ever got the chance to use it legitimately. This key item was programmed into Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum as the trigger for a secret legendary encounter that for many years went entirely unseen by most players outside of Japan. That encounter was with Darkrai, the pitch-black mythical Pokemon said to lure people into never-ending nightmares. In the Sinnoh games, the member card's description is deceptively simple: a card needed to access the inn in Canalave City. At first glance, this doesn't sound like much, but in reality, it unlocks one of the creepiest and most atmospheric side quests in the series. Normally, the door to a certain old inn in Canalave is locked, and interacting with it yields no result. But with the member card in your bag, you can enter, and the moment you step inside, the sequence begins. Inside the inn is a single room with a bed. When you examine it, your character automatically lies down and the screen fades to black. A cutscene then plays in which you awaken on a small, isolated island in the middle of the ocean. This is New Moon Island, a dark mirror to the well-known Full Moon Island where Cresselia can be found. The atmosphere here is immediately unsettling. The music is low and ominous. The skies are dark, and the entire place feels almost dreamlike. At the center of New Moon Island stands Darkrai, waiting silently. When you interact with it, the battle begins. This is the only way to legitimately encounter Darkrai in the Sinnoh games without using cheats, making the member card one of the most important and rare items in that era. The scarcity of the member card comes from its extremely limited distribution. It was officially released only during a short window of time in 2008 for Pokémon Platinum in Japan, and for Diamond and Pearl even earlier in 2008 in select regions through Nintendo Wi-Fi connection events. In many parts of the world, no official member card event was ever held. That meant that most players who owned the Sinnoh games could see the locked-in Canalave City for years, but had no way of ever entering it. The fact that the member card unlocks such a uniquely eerie event made its rarity even more frustrating for fans. The quest has a haunting, dreamlike quality unlike anything else in the series. The sudden transport to New Moon Island feels disorienting, and the dark, minimalistic design of the area gives it a surreal, almost lonely atmosphere. Capturing Darkrai here feels less like a standard legendary battle and more like stepping into the Pokémon world's version of a ghost story. Like other rare event items, the member card was quickly sought after through unofficial means. Players with action replay devices or save file editors could add the card to their inventory and trigger the New Moon Island event themselves. Even so, those who used cheats often expressed that the experience felt special, like unlocking a hidden chapter of the game's story that was always meant to be there, just out of reach. When Pokémon Platinum was released, the member card event was slightly reworked, but still remained locked behind official distributions. This meant that, for years, the vast majority of players around the world never got to experience Darkrai's intended in-game introduction. Instead, They had to settle for receiving the Pokémon directly through later mystery gift distributions, missing out on the atmospheric lead up that made the original encounter so memorable. It wasn't until much later, with the release of Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, that the member card event returned in an official, globally accessible form. In these remakes, the event was distributed through a mystery gift update, finally allowing players everywhere to step into the inn in Kanalov City and visit New Moon Island without resorting to hacking. For longtime fans who had waited since the Nintendo DS era, it was a rare moment of closure, the chance to legitimately experience something that had been locked away for over a decade. The member card's legacy is tied to its blend of rarity, mystery, and storytelling. Unlike some rare items that simply unlock a bonus battle or hidden area, the member card takes players on a brief but haunting journey into a darker corner of the Pokemon world. Its scarcity turned it into a kind of urban legend during the years when the event was inaccessible, and even now, it remains one of the most memorable examples of how Pokemon's rarest items can transform a simple game into something that feels like a secret shared between only a few lucky players. Few items in Pokemon history have achieved the same level of mystique as the GS Ball. This curious golden and silver Pokeball has roots not just in the mainline games, but also in the Pokemon anime, and for many years it stood as a symbol of unfinished plans, unfulfilled promises, and mysteries that left fans endlessly speculating. In both the games and the anime, the GS Ball was tied to one very special Pokemon, Celebi, the mythical guardian of the forest. The GS Ball first appeared in the Pokemon anime during the Johto Journeys arc. Ash Ketchum received it from Professor Ivy and was told to deliver it to Professor Oak in Pallet Town. It was clear from the way the ball was treated locked in a special case, given its own subplot, that it was important. But after a few appearances, the GS Ball seemingly vanished from the show without explanation. Years later, the anime's creators revealed that it was originally planned to contain Celebi and serve as the setup for a multi-episode storyline. That plan was scrapped when Celebi was instead used in the fourth Pokemon movie, leaving the GS Ball as one of the biggest dangling mysteries in anime history. In the games, the GS Ball's story was different, but just as elusive. It was programmed into Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal as a special event item that could be obtained only through a unique distribution. In Japan, the GS Ball was first made available through a mobile phone peripheral called the Mobile System GB in the year 2001 during a limited time event for Pokemon Crystal. Players who participated could connect to the service, download the GS Ball into their save file, and then take it to the Goldenrod Pokemon Center. Once delivered to the Pokemon Center, the ball would be examined and returned to the player, who was told to take it to the shrine in Ilex Forest. Upon placing it in the shrine, Celebi would appear, ready to battle at level 30. This was the only legitimate way to encounter Celebi in the original Game Boy Color games without using glitches or cheats. Outside of Japan, however, things were much trickier. The Mobile System GB was never released internationally, and so the GS Ball event was locked away from players in North America, Europe, and other regions. For years, Celebi was simply unobtainable through normal gameplay in these areas. Fans heard rumors of the GS Ball and saw screenshots in gaming magazines, but for most, it was an unreachable goal. The scarcity of the GS Ball in the West led to a flood of rumors and myths. Players tried all kinds of elaborate theories, from winning a certain number of bug catching contests to completing the Pokedex without trading in hopes that the GS ball would appear. None of these worked. Of course, the event was hard coded to require a distribution that never happened outside Japan. In 2010, nearly a decade after its original debut, the GS Ball was finally made available outside of Japan in the Virtual Console release of Pokémon Crystal for the Nintendo 3DS. In this version, players could obtain the GS Ball simply by defeating the Pokémon League and then visiting the Goldenrod Pokémon Center. This was the first time that international players could experience the Celebi event exactly as it had been intended without needing to hack their games. For many, it was a nostalgic but surreal moment finally holding the long-lost GS Ball in their inventory and taking it to the Ilex Forest Shrine after years of hearing about it. Part of what makes the GS Ball so legendary is that it represents more than just a rare item. It's a relic from a time when Pokemon events were deeply tied to real-world technology, distribution limitations, and regional exclusivity. It's also a reminder of how Pokemon's media, the games, the anime, and even the movies sometimes overlapped in ways that didn't always pan out as planned. Today, the GS Ball holds a special place in Pokemon history as both a collector's curiosity and a piece of fandom folklore. In the games, it's tied to one of the most charming mythical Pokemon encounters ever designed. In the anime, it's an unfinished story that still inspires what if discussions decades later. And in the hearts of fans, it's proof that sometimes the rarest treasures aren't just the ones you can hold in your bag. They're the ones that spark the biggest mysteries. In the mid-2000s, Pokemon events were in a golden age of mystery, and nothing captured that sense of wonder quite like the Aurora ticket. This rare key item was programmed into Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald as the exclusive pass to a hidden location, Birth Island. There, waiting alone in a puzzle-filled landscape, was Deoxys, a mythical Pokemon with multiple forms, each representing a different battle strategy. For many players, the Aurora ticket was their only shot at catching this elusive alien-like Pokemon. The item's description in-game was straightforward. The ticket required to board the ferry to Birth Island, but the journey it unlocked was anything but ordinary. Once obtained, the Aurora ticket allowed the player to travel by ferry from the harbor in either Vermilion City in Fire Red and Leaf Green or Lily Cove City in Emerald to Birth Island, a small, triangular landmass in the middle of the ocean. The island's design was unlike anything else in the series. Its sharp, geometric shape and mysterious black boulder in the center made it feel almost alien. The event itself wasn't just a simple walk-up encounter. Upon landing on Birth Island, players found the boulder positioned far from the center. Each time they approached it, the boulder moved to a new position, following a strange triangular pattern. To make it move again, players had to step onto the exact spot it had just occupied, then approach it once more. This puzzle repeated several times, drawing the player closer and closer to the island's center. Once the boulder reached the exact middle, it transformed into Deoxys, triggering the battle. Deoxys's appearance on Birth Island was special, not only because it was a mythical Pokemon, but also because it could change forms depending on which version of the game you were playing. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, it would appear in attack form. In Emerald, it would appear in speed form. Later games would make changing forms a mechanic tied to meteorites, but in Generation 3, the form you caught was locked to the game you used. Obtaining the Aurora ticket was no small feat. In North America, it was distributed only during select live events in 2004 and 2005, such as Pokémon Rocks America and the Nintendo World Store in New York City. In Japan, it was available through Pokémon Festa 2004. The ticket was transferred to your game through the mystery gift system, which required a wireless adapter on the Game Boy Advance, a relatively new piece of hardware at the time. For many fans, attending one of these events meant traveling long distances, sometimes to entirely different states or regions, just to receive the ticket. Outside of Japan and North America, Aurora ticket events were even rarer, with only a handful of official distributions in places like the United Kingdom, Germany, and Australia. In many countries, it was never officially available at all, making Birth Island a place most players could only read about in magazines or online forums. The rarity of the Aurora ticket made Birth Island one of Pokemon's most whispered about locations. Rumors and myths swirled about alternate ways to reach it, from talking to specific NPCs in a certain order to completing the Pokedex without trading. None of these methods worked, of course, but in the pre-social media era, word-of-mouth speculation was powerful, and for some players, the Aurora ticket took on an almost mythical status in its own right. Like many rare event items from this period, the Aurora ticket eventually became accessible only through unofficial means. Players used Action Replay or GameShark devices to add the ticket to their save files, allowing them to visit Birth Island and catch Deoxys without attending an event. While purists frowned upon hacking, many players felt it was the only way to experience content that was otherwise locked away forever. Even then, the thrill of solving the boulder puzzle and facing Deoxys in battle made the effort worth it. Years later, in the era of emulation and ROM hacking, the Aurora ticket has taken on a new life as a symbol of Pokemon's event-based mystique. Fan-made distributions recreate the official process, letting players experience the event as it was meant to be, arriving at a real-world distribution machine, receiving the ticket, and setting sail for Birth Island. The Aurora ticket stands as a perfect example of how Pokémon blended in-game secrets with real-world exclusivity during the Game Boy Advance era. It was more than just a key item, it was a passport to a place most trainers never reached, a tangible link between the Pokémon world and the real one. And for those lucky enough to have sailed to Birth Island legitimately, it was a memory they would carry for the rest of their Pokémon journey. In the world of rare Pokémon items, Oak's letter holds a special place as one of the most elusive and atmospheric event triggers in the series. This key item, programmed into Pokémon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, was designed to unlock an encounter with Shaman, the mythical grass-type Pokémon known as the Gratitude Pokémon. Unlike many mythical encounters that take place in hidden caves or secret islands, Shaman's event was something entirely different, a peaceful, emotional journey to a place that feels like it exists outside of normal time. In the final games, Oak's letter is described simply as a letter from Professor Oak. Written in it is a request for you to go to Route 224. But this simple instruction hides one of the most beautiful event sequences in the series. Once you have Oak's letter in your bag, you can travel to Route 224, a quiet stretch of road that normally ends in a cliff overlooking the ocean. There, you meet Professor Oak himself, who speaks about the importance of expressing gratitude, a theme directly tied to Shaman's lore. He then asks you to think of someone you're grateful to, and as your character reflects, a white stone appears at the end of the path. When you step onto this stone, an incredible sight unfolds. A glowing, flower-lined road called the Sea Break Path appears, stretching far into the horizon over the ocean. This path is impossibly long, one of the longest continuous routes in the entire Pokémon series, and it leads to a lush meadow filled with flowers swaying gently in the breeze. In the center of this field waits Shaman at level 30. Unlike most legendary battles, this one feels quiet and personal, as though Shaman is meeting you out of kindness rather than challenge. The problem was that almost no one outside of Japan got to see this sequence when the games were first released. Oak's letter was never officially distributed for Pokemon Diamond or Pearl in North America, Europe, or many other regions. In Japan, it was planned for release through a Nintendo Wi-Fi connection event in 2008, but ended up being delayed and quietly canceled for most players. It was only officially distributed for Pokemon Platinum in Japan during a short event window, making it one of the rarest Sinnoh-era items in existence. For the rest of the world, Oak's letter existed only as unused data buried in the game's code. Fans quickly discovered it through data mining and hacking, and by adding the item to their inventory with cheat devices, they could trigger the event themselves. Many who did this were struck by how serene and almost magical the Sea Break Path sequence felt. It was a departure from the high-stakes drama of most legendary encounters, focusing instead on themes of gratitude, beauty, and peace. The decision not to release Oak's letter more widely has never been fully explained. Some speculate that Game Freak wanted to avoid overwhelming the event schedule for Diamond and Pearl, which already included the member card for Darkrai and the secret key for Rotom's forms. Others believe it was a technical or distribution issue with the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection service. Whatever the reason, the result was that millions of players never got to experience what is arguably one of the most memorable and heartfelt mythical Pokemon events ever created. Oak's letter eventually got a second chance in the modern era. With the release of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the item was finally distributed globally in 2022, allowing players everywhere to walk the Sea Break path and meet Shaman without hacking. For longtime fans who had been aware of the event since the Nintendo DS days, it was a moment of closure, the chance to finally experience something they had been locked out of for over a decade. Even now, Oak's letter stands out among rare Pokemon items for the unique tone of its event. While other mythical encounters often emphasize danger, mystery, or puzzles, the Shaman event is entirely about reflection and gratitude. The Sea Break Path is not a place you battle through, but a place you walk, surrounded by nature, until you reach a Pokemon that embodies kindness. That, combined with its rarity, makes Oak's letter one of the most cherished treasures in Pokemon's long history of special items. In the long list of rare Pokemon event items, the Enigma Stone is one of those treasures that feels almost like a secret handshake among fans who were lucky enough to obtain it. This unobtrusive little item was the key to unlocking encounters with two legendary Pokemon in the Generation 4 remakes, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the twin Eon Pokemon, Latias and Latios. While both of these legendaries could be encountered through normal gameplay in each version, the Enigma Stone gave players the opportunity to catch the one that was normally exclusive to the opposite version, completing the duo without trading. In Pokemon Heart Gold, Latias could be encountered in the overworld after the main story, roaming around the Kanto region. In Pokemon Soul Silver, Latios filled that role instead. The Enigma Stone's purpose was to unlock the alternate legendary Latios in Heart Gold and Latias in Soul Silver, but it did so in a much more memorable way than simply handing the Pokémon to the player. Once you received the Enigma Stone, you were instructed to take it to the Pewter City Museum. There, a researcher would examine the mysterious gem and conclude that it was actually the Soul Dew, a rare item tied to the Eon Pokémon. The moment this revelation happened, the Pokémon you were missing, either Latios or Latias, would appear just outside the museum. It wasn't a long quest or an elaborate dungeon, but the presentation made it feel like a special moment, as though this hidden legendary had come looking for you after sensing the energy of the Soul Dew. The rarity of the Enigma Stone comes entirely from its limited distribution. In Japan, it was available for a short period in 2010 as a Nintendo Wi-Fi connection event. In North America, it was released only between August 27th and September 12th of that same year, and you had to connect to the mystery gift service during that window to receive it. In Europe, the distribution dates varied by country, but all were similarly brief. If you didn't happen to check the official Pokémon website or hear about the event during those couple of weeks, you likely missed your chance forever. This limited window made the Enigma Stone one of those blink and you'll miss it items, and as a result, many players never even knew it existed. Because Latios and Latias could still be obtained through trading or roaming encounters, the Enigma Stone wasn't strictly necessary to complete your Pokédex. But for collectors and completionists, it was a big deal. Not only did it give you the other Eon Pokémon in your own game, but it also came with the Soul Dew, which boosted the special attack and special defense of Latios and Latias in battle. In the competitive scene, that item was incredibly useful at the time, making the event even more desirable. What made the Enigma Stone particularly frustrating for some fans was how quietly it was announced. Unlike some big event items that were hyped months in advance and distributed at large in-person gatherings, the Enigma Stone was given out almost without fanfare. If you weren't actively checking Pokemon news or connecting to Mystery Gift regularly, you could easily go your entire time with Heart Gold or Soul Silver without ever knowing that such an event existed. In hindsight, the Enigma Stone is a great example of the event culture of the DS era, a time when mythical and legendary Pokemon were often gated behind extremely short availability windows, and missing even one meant you might never see that content on your cartridge again. For those who did manage to grab it, the Enigma Stone was a delightful bonus, a way to tie up one of the few loose ends in the postgame and add another rare legendary to your team without having to trade. Today, the Enigma Stone is mostly remembered by longtime fans who experienced those Nintendo Wi-Fi events firsthand. In the modern era of Pokémon, where special Pokémon and items are often distributed multiple times a year to ensure players don't miss them, the one-time only nature of the Enigma Stone feels almost alien. But that's part of what makes it so special. It was a reward for paying attention, for being connected to the Pokémon world at just the right moment, and for holding on to a piece of in-game history that most players never saw. For many Pokémon players of the Game Boy Advance era, the idea of sailing to a distant, secret island to catch not one, but two legendary Pokémon was the ultimate dream. The Mystic Ticket was the key item that made that dream a reality, at least for the lucky few who managed to get their hands on it. This event-exclusive pass unlocked Naval Rock, a remote island where Lugia and Ho-Oh awaited deep inside its cavernous cliffs. On paper, it was one of the most exciting Pokémon events of its time. In practice, it became one of the rarest and least accessible pieces of content in the series. The Mystic Ticket was programmed into Pokémon Fire Red, Leaf Green, and emerald, and its in-game description was short and mysterious. A ticket required to board the ferry to Naval Rock. Once obtained, it allowed players to travel from Vermilion City's harbor in Fire Red and Leaf Green, or Lily Cove City's port in Emerald to this special island. When you arrived, Naval Rock appeared as a massive, sheer cliff rising out of the ocean. The inside was a winding path that split into two distinct routes, one leading up a long vertical staircase and one descending deep underground. At the top of the climb was Ho-Oh, perched majestically at level 70. At the bottom, hidden in a quiet underwater cavern, was Lugia, equally powerful and equally ready for capture. Being able to catch both of these legendary birds in a single trip was unprecedented at the time, and it instantly made the Mystic Ticket one of the most desirable items in the game. The problem was that acquiring the Mystic Ticket required attending a real-world event during a very narrow window of time. In Japan, it was distributed during Pokémon Festa 2004 and a few other small gatherings. In North America, it appeared at select Pokémon Rocks America events and the Nintendo World Store in New York City. A handful of European countries received it as well, but these distributions were rare and poorly advertised. If you didn't live near a participating location, or even worse, if you didn't know about the event, your chances of ever visiting Naval Rock were essentially zero. Like other Game Boy Advance event items, the Mystic Ticket was transferred to your game using the Mystery Gift system and the wireless adapter peripheral. This made the event feel special and futuristic at the time, but it also created barriers for players who didn't own the necessary hardware or couldn't make it to an event. The exclusivity of the Mystic Ticket fueled endless rumors and myths among fans who missed it. Magazines and early internet forums were full of false methods to unlock Naval Rock without the event, ranging from beating the Elite Four a certain number of times to talking to a specific NPC in a particular order. Of course, none of these tricks worked, but in the pre-data mining era, the lack of information only added to the ticket's mystique. For those lucky enough to experience it, the Mystic Ticket event was unforgettable. The moment you set sail from the harbor, the boat ride felt different from any other journey in the game, with unique dialogue and a sense of traveling somewhere forbidden. Naval Rock's design, stark, symmetrical, and isolated, made it feel like a sacred place, reserved only for the strongest trainers. The ability to walk away with both Ho-Oh and Lugia in your Pokeballs was the ultimate prize, and it instantly elevated your team's status among friends. Outside of the official events, the only way to obtain the Mystic Ticket was through cheat devices like Action Replay or Game Shark. Many players resorted to this, not just to complete their Pokédex, but to experience the unique setting of Naval Rock. Even so, those who obtained it unofficially often described a bittersweet feeling excitement at seeing the island, but regret that they couldn't get there through legitimate means. In the years since, Naval Rock has become a fan-favorite location, often recreated in ROM hacks and fan games as a nod to one of Pokemon's most exclusive events. The Mystic Ticket itself remains a symbol of an era when special items were physical, time-limited rewards that could easily slip through your fingers if you weren't paying attention. Today, the Mystic Ticket is remembered not just for the legendary Pokemon it unlocked, but for the sense of mystery and adventure it embodied. In a time before global online distributions, it represented a kind of magic that could only be experienced by those willing and able to make the journey to a real-world Pokémon event. For many fans, it will always be one of the rarest and most treasured items in the franchise's history. In the era of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, most event items were tied to mythical or legendary Pokémon. But in Pokémon Platinum, one of the rarest event items wasn't about catching a new Pokémon at all. It was about unlocking a hidden secret for one you already knew. That item was the secret key, a small but important tool that granted access to Rotom's alternate forms, a first for the mischievous electric and ghost-type Pokémon. Rotom had been introduced in Diamond and Pearl as a quirky ghost that could possess household appliances, but its original appearance was limited to a single base form. In Platinum, Game Freak decided to give Rotom a much bigger role and multiple alternate forms. However, these forms weren't accessible through normal gameplay. You needed the secret key, a rare key item that could only be obtained through a limited time event. The in-game description of the secret key simply read, "A special key that opens a door inside the Galactic Eterna building." At first glance, it didn't sound like much, but with it in your inventory, you could return to the Galactic building in Eterna City and unlock a hidden chamber filled with strange, glowing appliances. Interacting with each one would allow Rotom to change into a new form. Heat Rotom, oven; Wash Rotom, washing machine; Frost Rotom, refrigerator; Fan Rotom, electric fan; and Mow Rotom, lawn mower. These weren't just cosmetic changes. Each form had a unique type combination and signature move, making Rotom far more versatile in battle. The rarity came from how short the distribution window was. In Japan, the secret key was given out in early 2009 via Nintendo Wi-Fi connection and at select in-person events. In North America, it was available online only between April 20th and May 12th of that same year. In Europe, the dates were similarly brief and varied by country. If you didn't log into Mystery Gift during that tiny window, you missed your chance. Because of how low-key the event was, many players never even knew about the secret key. Rotom could still be caught in Platinum without it, but without the key, you'd never see its alternate forms, and in the days before online databases and tutorials were everywhere, most casual players simply assumed Rotom had no special transformations at all. The secret key was also one of the rare event items that didn't just unlock a battle or location, but actually expanded a Pokémon's utility in gameplay. The alternate forms were especially valued in competitive play, as each one opened up new strategic options. For collectors, the event had an extra thrill. The Galactic Chamber was beautifully designed, with futuristic lighting and an eerie atmosphere that made it feel like you were stepping into a secret laboratory. Years later, in games like Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and the Sun and Moon series, Rotom's forms became much easier to obtain, but the original Platinum event remains a standout moment. For those who were paying attention during that short distribution period, the secret key wasn't just another item in their bag. It was the literal key to unlocking something that most of their friends would never even know existed. The rarest items in Pokémon are more than just bits of code. They're windows into the history of the series, snapshots of an era when events were fleeting, mysterious, and often inaccessible to most players. From mythical flutes and long-lost tickets to quiet keys and ancient artifacts, each one carries a story of how Pokémon blurred the line between the real world and the game world. These items remind us that the Pokémon universe has always been bigger than what fits on a cartridge. Some of its treasures are locked away behind real-world journeys, fleeting opportunities, or unreleased plans, known only to the lucky few who were in the right place at the right time. And while modern events have made many of these Pokemon more accessible, there's still something magical about the ones we almost never saw, the ones whispered about on playgrounds, shared in grainy magazine scans, or hidden deep within game files. Even today, they continue to spark curiosity. They remind us that the Pokemon world is full of secrets and that sometimes the most exciting part of the adventure is knowing there's always more to discover if you can find the key.